I'm John, and I'm going to show you around the A3 interface. In this video, we'll tour the layout of the A3 system. You'll be acquainted with the major elements of A3's user interface, such as the default activity window, canvas, components, and top menu bar. Let's start on the main menu by clicking A3 Designer. This menu choice is used when you want to create a new mobile app. Your workspace, which is shown here, is divided into two parts. This rectangle here is called the default activity window. Components that you place within the default activity window are called user interface components and will end up appearing on the screen of the user's mobile device. Examples include a button, label, and a text field. The remaining space is called the canvas. This is where you'll place components of your mobile app that will work in the background and not be seen by your user. These components are called functional components. Examples of these functional components include send a text, save to a file, and send an email, as well as hardware components like the accelerometer and GPS. Notice that you can move the default activity window by clicking and dragging it. This is because not every app you build will require cell phone user interaction. In some cases, you may want to move it out of the way as you develop your app. You can also click and drag the canvas. Now let's look at the Components menu that sits on the left side of the screen. Components are your building blocks, what you assemble on the screen to create your mobile app. There are more than 140 components in the A3 library, and the number is growing daily. They are organized into 6 categories, which can be expanded to display the available components and collapsed to hide them as needed. You start building an application by dragging a component onto the screen. In this case, I'll use the button component, which can be found in the user interface category. This will be displayed to the user, so it belongs on the default activity window. The location of the components on the default activity window determines where they will appear on the screen of the user's mobile device. In this case, I want the button to be at the top of the screen. Next, I'll reach into the Input-Output category and select a component called Send SMS. SMS stands for Short Message Service, or simply a text message. The process of sending a text message takes place in the background, so this component is placed on the canvas. Notice that the system won't allow me to place the Send SMS component on the default activity window. It bounces back after I release the mouse. This is because the Send SMS is a functional component, not a user interface component, as we already discussed. Likewise, the system won't let me place a user interface component, such as the button, on the canvas. Notice when I click on the button component, a property box displays in the upper right corner of the screen. Properties allow you to define characteristics of the component. In this case, I can define the size of the button on the user's screen in terms of pixels, and the label, which is the text which will appear on the button. When I click the Send SMS component, you see that I can enter the text of the message and the telephone number where the text message will be sent. Components have inputs and outputs. Inputs are positioned on the left side of the component, and outputs are on the right. In our example here, Trigger Message is an input of Send SMS, and State is an output of the button component. Some components have both inputs and outputs. The camera component, which I've just added to the default activity window, is one example. Components are linked together using connectors. If you click on the outputs and inputs of compatible components, a connector is created. I'll click on State on the button component and then on Trigger Message on the Send SMS component, and then I'll connect the button to the camera. If you try to connect incompatible inputs and outputs, you'll get an error message in the bottom left corner of the screen. To reshape a connector, click and drag one of the selector dots to curve or move the connector to where you want. If you need to delete a connector, Select it by clicking near one of the selector dots on the connector, then press the Delete key on your keyboard. If you want to move a component around on the workspace, click and drag it. Likewise, if you want to delete a component, select it and press Delete. Let's look at another element of A3's user interface, the top menu bar. The Save button will save the current progress of your app. You must give your app a unique name when you save it. It's helpful to have a descriptor too, so later you'll have reminders of what each app you've built does. The Compile button will compile your app and create an APK file. APK, which stands for Application Package File, is the file format read by Google's Android operating system. When working on a new app, you'll need to save before compiling. Please take note, though, you cannot compile until you have fully completed your app, or you will get an error. The Menu button returns you to the main menu. If you have not saved your app, your work will be lost if you leave this window. The Help button takes you to the video tutorial page, and the Logout button logs you out of the system. Again, save your work first. That concludes our video tour of the A3 user interface. You should now be familiar with the major interface elements, including the default activity window, canvas, components, including properties and connectors, and the top menu bar.